Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon. How are you?
I am very well. How are you? It's quite hot out.
I guess I could say very summary there in your kind
it is.
of the Hawaiian kind of shirt.
Yeah, I'm wearing the islands today.
Anyways, yeah. How hot is it then there?
It is a good. Right now, it's probably about 34 degrees Celsius.
34 degrees. Wow, that is
yes.
Hot. We had a couple of days like that a couple of weeks ago on results day. On the results when students were getting their results, the 2 days students were getting their results were like 32, 34. Yeah.
And the problem, I don't know about Great Britain.
So you can only imagine the state of some of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it humid there? Because Japan is very humid
in
the summer.
Well, yeah. I think it's probably not as humid but it's more humid where we live now.
Yeah.
The West Country, it's a bit more humid than where we lived previously, which was a bit landlocked. And you couldn't get more central to the middle of England than where we lived. or middle of England, middle England in every way. You couldn't get more middle England than Milton Keynes. Let's just put it that way. So yeah. Anyways, so sorry, I'm usually a few minutes early to calling you in, but today I just couldn't kind of work it all, get it all happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm wearing my red shirt today. So
Namo Amida Butsu.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
No. Yes. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Yeah. So hopefully it won't be, hopefully it's not an omen for how the day is going to go. Short red shirts. Red shirts going first. Anyway.
So, I did quite a bit of thinking and pondering on your, question related to sort of ignorance and, what we call avidya, right, in Sanskrit. But in Japanese, it's actually mumyo, which means the literal characters are mu, which is no, and myo, which is light. And so no light is it's a state of no light in a spiritual sense. And a light, of course, in Buddhism is wisdom, right? So we also refer to Amida Buddha as the light of wisdom. So when we're talking about the state of Bombu being mumyo, no light, we're in the dark, so to speak, in terms of this wisdom, right, that the Buddha has. We do not have. And the translation ignorance is not incorrect. In fact, there is I think it's also sometimes called muchi or no knowledge, but really the more than ignorance, it's more of a state of spiritual darkness, so to speak, in terms of the wisdom and the way out of our predicament. So and do you have any thoughts that you have had since last week regarding this question? Or I was going to share a couple of passages that kind of relate to.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds good. I listened. I'm getting ready to post our next, trying to catch up to the present with our dialogues. And I listened to the one that we did before you went, like a couple of weeks before you, or a week or something before we went to America. Both of us went to America. You were there first, and then I went. Yeah. And the one where it was about the question I had was kind of related to Yenbo's and all that kind of came out of that discussion. And it was like, whoa, it's just crazy to go back and, and listen to it again and pick up on things I hadn't before.
Yeah.
Like, boom. That's all I can say. When I do put it on Facebook, I'm going to say, all I can say about this session is boom. Because
a Dharma boom.
it was like so much came out of that session. You don't almost realize it at the time,
Yeah.
And how that, and where I've moved on to since then, and in such a short span of time. But that was quite a session. You'll see what I mean. I don't know if you remember it.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'll probably remember once I see. But
it's just like, yeah, we got into the three minds and the.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, and it's just so much came out. So much. It was like, and things I was saying just sort of, anyway, it was good. You'll see what I mean.
Good. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
And I always pick up on things that when I re-listen to them. Whoa, sorry, the wind just blew my door shut.
It wasn't a poltergeist.
No, that was our friends from the Peta. It wasn't one of our friends from the ghost realm. Although that's a whole nother topic, but so the things that I pick up on that we said, we'll talk about it in another discussion, and there was one of those. It was another one of those. We were saying we want to get around to talking about morality and responsibilities and duties, and what Renyo and Shinran say about how to conduct ourselves in life and society and morally and all that kind of stuff. So if there's no precepts, then if we as Bombu can't effectively even really understand what the precepts are about and apply them properly, then what do we do? What do we do? And if we're not supposed to take the 3 poisons, but because we have the antidote, we don't take the 3 poisons. But so how do we what's the deal? And there's guidelines in past provisional teachings about moral things, and how much of that do we take and how much do we not? How much do we use that as a guide? How much do we use things like even for political, social things? How much do we use as a guide? The 10 principles of kingship, or whatever it's called, that the Buddha gave. All those kinds of things. How do we incorporate that in our lives as Jodo Shinshu? And that one it's come up a few times. We keep saying eventually we got to talk about this.
Yes.
For the end of our chat, and we've never come back to it. So I'd like to finally do that if we can, because that is a pretty major one. And then because I talked about how I get wrapped up in sometimes in the moral aspect of it, and and I can see why precepts don't work, because it's like even us trying to try to live certain teachings and certain, we get self-righteous about it. We get, do you know what I mean? It goes wrong, or we go to extremes, or we misinterpret things, or we become judgmental, and it doesn't help us. I mean, the whole point of precepts is for mind state, isn't it? It was a support.
Right. Yeah.
Support for the path. It's a support for your word, that the Buddha gave those was as a support to, the eight, as part of the Eightfold Path, and just as part of clearing the mind stream, so it's easier to meditate, easier to live rightly, easier to, do you know what I mean? It's all fits in, it all,
yes.
But we're not trying to clear our mind stream. We're not trying to clear the channels of faith, I suppose, but that's Amita's job. Even that's Amita's job, really. So
yeah,
so like what so I can we don't really need the precepts in that sense, but we're meant to. But it does, to me, it does. I was talking about this with some of my Dharma brothers at our last Dharma. The precepts came up because of what we're studying, and I said I said that though we don't need precepts in the same way that past teachings did. We don't. I find, though, if I'm at least trying to live within some kind of moral precept-like structure, that it's easier to deep listen. And I gave the example of my eating. At times, I've experienced my trying to live this path and deeply listen and stuff as a full active glutton, with my food. And I've experienced that versus the past several years where I stopped, living that way. And it's much easier to be able to study and listen and read things and have discussions with people. And do you know what I mean? And to have the time or have the motivation to do it. So there's still, to me, there does seem to be a component there of,
Yeah, absolutely.
Fifth precept when I'm talking about my gluttony, I abstain from that like I would drinking, because it's, I think any addiction really is the kind of the fifth precept has something to say about that, even though we're not meant to, the precepts, as they say, there are no precepts for us. But anyway, that's it. That's kind of, I just want to talk about all those things. And
absolutely. Well, Shinran says that the vow, Amita's vow, the medicine of the Buddha's vow destroys the poisons of our foolishness and wisdom.
Wow. And wisdom.
And the poison of our wisdom.
I mean, who says that? Who said that?
Shinran Shonin.
Shonin. Wow.
And yeah, I think what you observed is really the and not even just exclusive to Buddhism. I mean, many religions have, sort of rules about, don't drink too much alcohol, right? Not all religions outlaw it completely. I think, for example, Islam, you're not supposed to drink at all. And then other religions, have different rules, right? So, but there's, there is a sort of, it's not just Buddhism. It's, there are some moral ideas and concepts, ethical guidelines. How to live an ethical life is also a major concern of, Western philosophy, starting with the ancient Greeks, right? And the Nicomachean Ethics, by Aristotle and Plato and so on. So this is kind of a universal project, the ethical, how to live an ethical life. And it does so happen that Buddhism gives very, very, good and wise recommendations for how to live such a ethical life, because the Buddha, answered the questions that people asked him about, how should I live and do into what are, so yeah, and living, living a moderate moderately, not drinking to excess, not eating to excess, not, that does help us, spiritually, physically, mentally. It's kind of how we are more healthier. We can pay attention, not fall asleep in the middle of the Dharma talk. So all of this stuff is important, and absolutely good to do. I remembered, Rinyo Shonin kind of reprimanded priests at temples who were, getting drunk, and he said, we don't say that you have to not drink alcohol at all, but you shouldn't be, getting inebriated before you, do the Dharma service. So, so there's a lot of common sense.
I was say that. Use some common sense. In other words, I was just going to say that's
exactly. And that's 90% of it, really. It's except that common sense is not something that is so common.
It's Mappo. No, common sense in Mappo is a bit, strained. It's a bit,
And of course, Shinran, says famously the saying of, just because you have found the antidote to the poison doesn't mean you should drink poison, right? So this actually ties in very nicely with something that Kobai Sensei discussed with regard to Tanisho, and when Tanisho talks about the evil in the sense of the evil person is the true object of immediate salvation. What does that mean? There were people who took that to mean, or misinterpreted that to mean, well, we're saved by Amida and we'll go to the Pure Land so we can do whatever we want. We can just go go wild and
woohoo!
Yeah, it's life is a party.
In fact, some went even further than that and said wasn't there a sort of school of thought going around, like divergent teaching, that was saying in fact we're meant to, because the more we engage in these things, the more evil we are somehow, the more of his light will shine on us, or more our salvation will be more assured through some really human beings, man.
We always take something good and turn it twist it around, and really that's it's always goes back to the ego, the what Shakyamuni called the builder of this house, and that ego is just constantly being fueled. Some of the things I was looking at, because you asked about the question about ignorance and so on and evil, is of course the wheel of life in the Tibetan tradition, that Tonka painting that has the shows samsara, and then in the middle there's 3 animals that represent craving, greed, anger, and then avidya, ignorance, and they're going around in a circle.
Basically, it's basically attraction, aversion, ignorance, because attraction is desire, is greed. Then it says greed. A lot of it's translated as greed, anger, and ignorance, but it's really
attraction, aversion, ignorance. Yes.
But just to make people to kind of get,
exactly. And those 3 little animals running around in a circle are what fuels the ego. That's what we're. If it's like an engine running on gasoline, we are running on.
Gets the Nidana pistons going. gets the
the Nidana pistons.
the
Yes,
12
exactly.
Nidana
12
pistons.
cylinders. All 12 cylinders. Yeah. Which leads me to the Nidanas, which is the 12 links of dependent origination.
Yeah.
And those, of course, each have a symbol. The symbol for ignorance is actually a blind person walking along with a staff.
Yeah.
And this represents our state as Bombu, unenlightened beings. We can't. It's like Genshin said, although my eyes are blinded by Bono passions, and the kleshas, and I cannot see the light. Yet Amida is constantly illuminating, shining on me. So we are that blind person, And the interesting thing about the Nidana, the 12 links of dependent origination, is I used to have a sort of a misconception about this, that they have a beginning and an end. In other words, that you start, because usually it starts with ignorance and then it ends with birth and death, right? But it's actually, if you look at that wheel of life, it goes around and around and around. There's no starting point.
Yeah.
On the wheel, right? So what this is intended to show us is we can ask, where does the arrow come from, and where was the beginning of ignorance? But really, it's part of a cycle, a process that we are in. So it's hard to talk about it in terms of beginning and ending. Yeah. I think because it's a wheel, right? It's a constantly going thing, and there are many different interesting explanations of the 12 links. And actually, in early Buddhism, this was one of the points where different schools began to kind of have different interpretations or theories, kind of explaining sort of how they read those.
It's even more multidimensional when you take it to the sort of collective karma aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Almost, like how can you kind of pinpoint something in that, not just individual karma alone, but then you put together all the karmic ties and all the complicated relationships of karmic and what I mean, karmic ties and collective karma and how it's almost like a
even
sphere of instead of a wheel, it's just anyway.
Yeah. And even if you think about our own existence in this life alone, when you start to consider all the causes and conditions that are necessary for me to live this life, there's no like drawing an end to that. The entire universe as it is, those are the causes and conditions that gave rise to my existence now and has for the beginningless past. And so Shinran uses the term beginningless past. And I just want to quote a passage really quick. So he's talking about entrusting. He says, next, concerning entrusting, it is the ocean of Shinjin, perfect and unhindered. That is the Tathagata's consummately fulfilled great compassion. Hence, there is no mixture of doubt. It is therefore called entrusting. The essence of entrusting is the sincere mind of benefiting others and directing virtues. However, since the beginningless past, the multitudes of beings have been transmigrating in the ocean of ignorance, sinking aimlessly in the cycle of all forms of existence and bound to the cycle of all forms of pain. Accordingly, they lack the entrusting that is pure. In the manner of their existence, they have no entrusting that is true and real. And then he goes on to say, this is why it is so difficult for us to realize Shinjin, right? Realize this genuine, true, and trusting. And that this Shinjin is in fact being directed to us from the Buddha, from the Tathagata, from Amida, right? And the sincere mind is not our sincere mind. No, it's Amida's sincere mind. And echo is also the term that, like you mentioned, the reverse polarity. you know,
polarity of exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. The echo, the transference of virtue, the directing of virtue is from Amida's pure mind being directed, those virtues, which is the working of the fulfilled vow, is being directed to me. It's not, so it's a completely opposite direction. But what Shinran says here, the beginningless past.
It's almost, I basically say, the way to look at it, for someone that might not know about Goto Shinshu or Pure Land Buddhism at all, I say, so if you think of any Buddhist teaching and practice that you commonly know of as Buddhism, and think in those practices, the person, it's up to the individual's self-power to do that alone. That's what they're doing it so that they learn the teaching, they start a practice, they start having realization, that's their path. I'd basically say you just reverse it, and Amida is doing those practices for us.
Yes, exactly. That is right.
Amida giving, giving us his mind of enlightenment. We're not seeking it ourselves. He's giving us his realization. He's giving us his practice, his teaching. He's doing the practices for us. So you just reverse whatever concept you have of Buddhism, and reverse it from the instead of the individual trying to go to enlightenment, enlightenment's coming to us.
Yes, I love how you put that. Yeah, that is exactly right. It's the opposite.
Pretty much, yeah. Reverse any practice, and it's the Buddha doing it for us.
Yeah.
And giving us all the merits and all the credit.
Yeah.
Not really credit, but giving us all the benefit, all the benefit, virtue, all the merit of his practice without us.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, we're incapable of doing it or earning it. So there's no point.
Yeah.
So, yes. Sum it up. Let me explain. No, it's too much. Let me sum up. Yeah.
And so Shinran says here, this from the beginningless past, the multitudes of beings have been sinking and falling in the ocean of ignorance, the ocean of avidya, the ocean of mumyo, of no light. And the beginningless past is an interesting term, because I was doing a little research, and apparently the great theoretical physicist, well, the late great theoretical physicist, Stephen Hawking, he famously pointed out in a lecture he gave, I think it was at the Vatican, that the way we typically think of the universe in the temporal dimension is that before the so-called Big Bang, which we all call it that, even though that's not what it is. But before that, initial event, there must have been something before that, there must have been like some time before, right?
Yes.
And what Stephen Hawking observed and pointed out is that that's actually not the case. The the universe actually has no beginning.
Yeah.
In that sense, because you reach a limit where there is no time itself, which is one of the four dimensions. We have 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time.
Time is a samsaric thing.
Yeah, time itself is dependent on those other 3 dimensions. So you reach this point where there is no before. And it boggles the mind, and it kind of reminded me.
And also, you go the further you go down the sort of subatomic quantum levels of time, all that starts getting very weird and reverse. I mean, completely.
Matter. I mean,
breaks down.
It's funny because materialism, the idea that matter is what exists, that is a completely outdated, outmoded idea. No theoretical physicist, nobody who studies the universe. We now know that the stuff that we see, and that we can feel, this stuff doesn't exist in the way that we think it does. Right. It's actually almost inconceivable the way in which these things exist. So this is a place where science and Buddhism, I feel, are very kind of approach each other very closely. And another point is this idea of the beginningless past. It's the past, but there is no beginning. And we can't really, I can like listen to Stephen Hawking say that and say, I can nod my head and think, that makes sense, but I can't really conceptualize it, really. It's inconceivable to me. And that's what, like, we use that word a lot. And maybe it doesn't mean what we think it means. but we do keep using that word. So Buddha of inconceivable light, we can't, with our finite minds, we just simply cannot wrap our heads around it. In the same way, this idea of beginningless past is just kind of escapes your ability to grasp, even though, you can see, okay, that makes sense, that's logical, but it still is like, it's not a concept that we deal with in our daily life. So it's very hard to come to terms with. And, how, if someone asked, so when someone asked the Buddha, does the universe have a beginning or no beginning? Is all these questions, and the Buddha is just silent and doesn't respond. Well, maybe it's just because nobody could, even if he responded, we wouldn't get it. It's just it would go right over our heads.
Exactly. And this is where I say this before, is that science will, if science does what it's really meant to do, and if you take it as far as it will go, that saying, take your reason as far as it will go. There was one of the Huxleys said that, take your reason as far as it will go. I can't remember the name of the quote. It's a very long thing, but that's, if you take that if you take science as far as it will go, you kind of it starts becoming a finger pointing at the moon. It starts to become a Buddhist kind of, you can, I'm not saying that it's a good idea for scientists to start getting into philosophical terrain necessarily, but I'm just saying that if you take yourself, science as far as it will go, it does wind up saying, anyway, it's a Buddhism. It does point you in. It becomes a finger pointing at the moon, as I said. But anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people have even gotten very interested in Buddhism because of science, and because science has been pointing us in a non-material, direction of consciousness and the mind. And that's why, even like the Dalai Lama has done a lot of sponsorship of, the Mind Life Institute is a organization that examines this, connection between Buddhist teaching and the mind. And so it's a very exciting, interesting, topic and field of research in my opinion.
Yeah, I love those. There's a lot of stuff like that on YouTube. Some good, some not as good. But where it's that proper kind of, you've got a proper sort of either bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni or a proper Buddhist teacher involved, or the Dalai Lama. Those symposiums or those sort of dialogue kind of events are quite good. Yeah. So
very interesting stuff.
Things as well that are good, trying to kind of look at, not saying that science and Buddhism are saying the same thing, but just looking at they're analogous, looking how they correspond, how they relationship. But anyway, it's very good. But.
Yeah, I really enjoy. I sometimes reference the work of Dr. Alexander Berzin. I think it's how you say his name, but he's the Dalai Lama's personal physician. And he's also a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And he has a great website. I think it's called the Berzin Archives now. But it's got, of course, it's all, the teaching from the Vajrayana, point of view. But the common stuff is all shared by, pretty much all schools of Buddhism. And it's got some great resources about, a lot of topics relating to Buddhism and so on. So great stuff. In this, I think this beginningless past, for me at least, I mean, this is kind of a satisfying, even though, it's not like the answer isn't like written out, but just these kinds of things for me is kind of satisfyingly like, oh, that makes sense. I can see, and the sort of the need to really like, it's personally satisfying to me in terms of the question regarding these topics. So I wanted to share that with you in the hopes that it would be helpful or informative or have some bearing on the question about ignorance and the origin of evil, right? In the Buddhist terms, we don't have
that origin thing. That origin, it's and I think coming back to, we were talking about the one of the first earlier things we were talking about was the the chain of dependent origination, the 12 link dependent origination. It kind of points to it, but it's saying origination is not. It's not what you think it is. I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Yeah, it's not origination in the sense of an absolute beginning. This is how things arise. Sometimes it's actually not. Origination is maybe a misleading translation. Arising may be a better. Sometimes it's the 12 links of dependent arising.
And it's not just happening it's happening all the time, down to the smallest inconceivably smallest period of time you can imagine.
Yes. Yeah.
That arising.
Yeah.
Birth, death, that cycle is happening down to the smallest nanosecond. We just don't see it. It's coming back to what how the whole material, even scientifically, because that's basically, there are scientific things that point toward the same thing, that our perceptions are so tied to that, and we think it's kind of moving along in this linear fashion, and but it's really almost like this hologram. We're just creating this hologram in front of us, or what I mean? It's just like a dream. It's not, and we just think we're kind of moving from the past into the future, but it's not. That's not what's happening. It's just like there's just birthday, like, and we think, there's this continuity of my consciousness, and there's me, and there's this ego that's continuing. I'm here, but it's really, that's not. It's really
not that simple.
And you think it's like the fire, it's like the fire starting at the one man's house, and burning through the village, and there is a continuity there, even though he, I think he tries to deny it. Isn't there that story? I think it's Chucky when he uses the story of the fire, and the one man tries to deny it. And I think he's more talking about karma, I think, in that sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
That fire is, you still are, that fire that's starting your house is still connected to your, even though it's a different flame. But I'm just using it a different way. I'm using it, that flame, but it's a different, it's not, there's a continuity, but it's not what you think it is. You see what I mean? And it's much more fluid, and it's not the same thing as it did when it started in the one end of the,
exactly. The like you said, the concept of rebirth is actually permeates. That's why we call it birth and death, samsara, right? So all
right. So anyway,
and so I think you were also, asking about, does that kind of address, though, your question? I mean, we don't have in Buddhism, an apple eating an apple story for the origin of evil. There is, there is a creation myth, kind of a sort of creation myth, I think, in some Pali or Theravadan text, that has, like, there's sort of celestial beings, and then it's really interesting, like the planet or the surface of the ground, like, cools, and it's like, I guess it tastes good, so the celestial beings come down and start to eat the surface of the planet, and then they, like, become
but that's
material.
It's so great, it's so beautiful, actually, the description.
It's really interesting.
And it's cool, and that at one point the stars were kind of conscious. There was these kind of things that you thought of as stars, you could think of as stars, but they're just light, basically, top forms of light that is the kind of conscious beings, kind of in the, or almost not quite, I guess it would be material kind of world, but do you know what I mean? And then it becomes, anyway, but I know it's talking on a consciousness level, and a a provisional teaching level for us to kind of understand. But I heard one Jodo Shinshu teacher that I interviewed once. I was saying how I'm so really, when I was talking about how fascinated I am with Buddhist cosmology, and I love it. I love looking into all different, whether it's the stuff we're talking about today, or the different realms, beings in them, the really weird, stuff that's, really cool, and thinking about implications of weird things that happen, the so-called paranormal is normal to me. Do you know what I mean? In a Buddhist context, you can kind of flip it. It's not, it's, everything's kind of para, you know what I mean? Everything's kind of normal para. It's, Buddhist cosmology kind of normalizes all the things that we would think of as, spooky. That's not really, it's just samsara. It's just, but anyway, And I was saying to him how I'm really fascinated with it. I love it. But I said, I know it's samsara though. I know it's like, he's like, yeah, I know. I understand. I know what you mean. It's kind of like a car crash. Yeah. You really shouldn't enjoy watching it, but somehow you do. And, and then seeing all the after, and it's, you could look away, but you can't. Anyway.
Well, in one aspect too, in Jodo Shinshu, I mean, Shinran, we learn that the Buddha is through his bodies of transformation, personified, accommodated. The Buddha is, active in samsara in order to bring us to that realization that birth and death is nirvana, So, for example, I mean, the Buddha can take so many forms that we don't even necessarily notice, I mean, it could be, So, yeah, I mean, and one thing too is going back to the sort of creation, not really a creation myth, obviously, but the sort of origin story kind of text is there's a one-to-one correspondence to scientific theory about how life evolved and so on. But if you're going to ask about the origins of our ego and our self-centeredness as creatures on this planet, if you go back millions of years before there were even human beings, the first living things that were competing, if you will, for survival in whatever sense, there was already, even at that primitive stage, there was self-interest, because as I'm a little creature living, a little one-celled organism looking for light and trying to eat other creatures, I'm eating, devouring other beings to sustain my own life. I'm avoiding things that are bigger than me. We already have right there, we have craving, aversion, and ignorance. right there in that little
very most subtlest start.
Yeah.
Already, as soon
it's
as
all there.
Boom.
Yeah. I mean, even in a little one-celled organism, it has craving.
Yeah.
It wants to live. It has to devour other things. Yeah. It has aversion because it doesn't want to get eaten. So it has, and it has ignorance because it's not aware of, any of this.
That's in wherever it's in. Yeah. Wherever it is. Know that's a human body that it's in, or that's a water that it's in. It just doesn't even do that. It just does what it does. Yeah. And it's similar. There's a similar aspect to that. If we go back to what we were just talking about, the so-called, in the beginningless, the beginning of the beginningless, where those first kind of beings kind of come into that real subtle, formless mind consciousness realm. Once that starts, again, it might take a longer time, but eventually all those things start to arise eventually. Even at that subtle, as soon as that, as soon as it's any kind of separate thing, I and other, that's that distinction. And even when we are little young children, as babies, we don't make that distinction, and then we learn the way the concept of self. So we can look at this in a broad, like looking at evolutionary history, millions of eons, cosmological history. We can We can look at it,
or
and
we
down
can look at it in terms of one person, one life. Like you said, it's,
1 nanosecond. We can go that high down that and still have the same origins, it's the same origination at that nanosecond. You know what I mean? And it's the I that is kind of perpetuating through it, like we were saying. It's, I think there's this continuous existence, but it's not, so therefore I've got gotta stay away from that. Gotta get that. Don't want that.
The builder of this house. I love that. If you've ever seen the movie The Little Buddha with Keanu Reeves.
Funny enough, I was just reflecting on thinking about that film just this weekend, because I've kind of was sorting out my office a bit more. It's been over a year, just gone a year since we've been living where we're living now, and there's certain levels of where you get things organized to, and then you don't have time to, you know what I mean? And my office, there was some things, and one of the things was organizing my DVDs, my collection of DVDs and Blu-ray and stuff. And I came across that, and I was thinking about the film. So it's quite recently. I was just anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, when I was in college, my Asian art instructor showed that movie in class, and that was actually one of the kind of first, one of, there were many, but one of the first sort of introductions to the entire, like the story of Shakyamuni's life that was really powerful for me at the time, and really made me want to learn more. But I just wanted to quote, because it is an actual scripture from the Pali Canon, I believe, where Gautama Buddha, the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, faces the self, the builder of this house. He says, "Through countless births in the cycle of existence, I have run, not finding, although seeking, the builder of this house. And again, I face the suffering of new birth. O house builder, now you are seen. You shall not build a house again for me. All your beams are broken. The ridgepole is shattered. The mind has become freed from conditioning. The end of craving has been reached." Kind of gives you shivers almost to hear.
Goes and hearing Mara screaming and whimpering, and then tail between his legs, walking off.
Exactly. And then he goes, "The earth is my witness."
Beautiful,
right? And he touches the ground.
Anyway, along with his daughters, walking off, all his legions of armies. So, lost another one.
Yeah. This round goes to Shakyamuni.
Yeah, I'll try again though, because I'm Mara. So.
Yeah, and that famous, the statue is where the Buddha is has one hand pointing downward to touch the ground. This is where that mudra comes from, is he calls on the earth to witness his enlightenment. I always remember, Keanu Reeves again in the movie saying, "The earth is my witness."
Exactly. I had it was a bit interesting. The film, I love the film. I love the film. It's you can watch it on so many different levels.
It is quite
level. You don't want to take it too far on a Buddhist level, because you're kind of, you know what I mean. It's not. It's meant to be a film. It's meant to be a story,
right?
And so you kind of have to come back out of the Buddhist, just to come back to the story and the narrative of it, and just enjoy it. And it's quirky. I love the quirkiness of it, just because of the nature of what's going on and the reactions of these people in the sort of regular world, and suddenly this Buddhist cosmology is crashing into their lives, and so really great. Such good humor and silly in it, and sort of there's some cheesiness in it, and do you know what I mean? It's very of its time.
Definitely, yeah.
But the one thing was seeing Keanu Reeves, because Keanu Reeves at that point in my mind was the time traveling villain, part of the duo, Wild Stallions. You know, I saw him in that. You know, so some way that gave me a little bit of levity almost to it. It gave it like a bit of of levity to the whole thing. So you don't take it too seriously, which actually helped, because if you take the film too seriously, it becomes a bit schlocky or a bit.
Yeah, it doesn't work as like a super serious movie.
That's what I mean. So, but so anyway, so that was my story. But yeah, no, that's that quote. When you hear that, when you listen to that story, I'm getting chills now just thinking of the different times, and then you're just reading that when you think about that story and the epicness of the, and it probably all that happened within like an inconceivable nanosecond, but it just gives me chills. But yeah, no, the whole idea of the origin of ignorance, as I call it, the problem of ignorance, the problem of evil, as I call it in Buddhism, or just the problem of evil, the origin of evil in Buddhism. I kind of think, we say, we still have the problem of evil in Buddhism, but do we? Because the problem's with us. The problem
right.
Us.
Yeah.
Not only the evil of our way, Bombu and ignorant beings, but the problem of evil, the idea of an origin, that's us. The problem is with us. The problem isn't with the teaching. The problem with Buddhism. The problem is with us. Our perceptions, our ignorance. Our ignorance is what creates the idea of the origin of evil. The origin of evil is what creates the origin of evil, or the origin of ignorance. It's not, and I think Buddhist cosmology does a pretty good job of pointing the finger at the moon that's not how things work. You only think of that because of your consciousness, because of your samsaric consciousness. That's why you think of it in those terms. They trapped in that. That's you're always gonna have a problem. Then you're always gonna have the problem of ignorance and a problem of evil. You're always gonna have the problem of the origin of evil and the origin of you're gonna have that if you're gonna stay in samsaric consciousness. There's no way. It's by definition. It's a self-creating thing. It's not. So as we've talked over this past year or whatever it's been, that's loosened up a lot. That my difficulty with that, particularly in a fairly short span this year of months. It's loosened up as we've continued to talk about it, and Amita, working and that's loosened up quite a bit. And this whole conversation in general kind of points to it. You can't talk about that problem without talking about all of Buddhist cosmology and the implications of that. You have to kind of, and it's fun. It's great, and it's fun. It's cool that you can kind of say science kind of does point at the same thing. If you take science as far as it will go, it kind of points that time breaks down, or origins break down. Can't look at things that way. So even science addresses the problem, so-called problem of evil or problem of ignorance. And just knowing that it's tied to our everything's it's tied to our consciousness. It's tied to our perceptions. All it's because of our obscured monkey mind that problem of evil or problem of origin.
I want to read you one more verse from Shinran Shonin's Hymns of the Pure Land. Sorry, it's actually the Shozo Matsu Wasan. So the hymns of the three Dharma ages. And Shinran in this verse is kind of lamenting the Mappo. He's talking about the sorrow of living in a time where there is, no Buddha and so on. And this verse, he says, and I think this kind of also addresses the question you have about, karmic evil. So he says, karmic evil is from the beginning without real form. It is the result of delusional thought and invertedness. Mind nature is from the beginning pure, but as for this world, there is no person of truth. So what you were saying is, it's not that this karmic evil is it doesn't have real, it's not real in the sense of it has an absolute reality, right? Because in Buddhism, we kind of don't have that, but it's a product of our delusion and our ignorance. So this is, I think, ties in exactly to what you were just saying.
That breaks it down perfectly, so yeah, I think this is a good, you kind of have to address this before getting into morality and trying to not be evil.
Yeah. And I think it's good that we had this conversation.
We're trying not to be evil. You have to just discuss all of this to before you can kind of talk, and talk about this and Buddhist cosmology before you can approach, I think, talking about morality and the principles of humanity and all of that. I think this is a good setup for our next.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a good setup. And what I'd like to do in our next meeting, and I can meet again next week, by the way, no problem, is let's go ahead and discuss the moral, ethical implications of the Shinshu path, and also what is the meaning of evil in Tanisho? Because since Kobai Sensei actually, in his lecture, he gave a very good explanation of this. So let's go ahead and cover that as kind of a continuation of this session.
Yeah, sure.
So we're going to go from the cosmic, the big picture, to the practical, so to speak, the daily life, the living in the world aspect of this
daily life, to borrow a phrase from one of our Buddhist neighbors. We'll say in Mappo, one of our Buddhist neighbors, Mappo. That anyway.
Yeah. And then I do, I know I say this every time, but I do want to also introduce chanting finally we will do it. We will get there. So maybe if we have time next time, and then if not, we can schedule for the time the week after next. But I think that'll be really fun and interesting session as well.
I'd like to run that more as a, maybe not, still have our informal discussion, but a little bit more formally where, I'd like to do it as a series, as a kind of
that would be great
series on my channel about chanting, about Shoshinge, about all those, all the liturgical kind of aspects of the Jodo tradition. I'd like to do that as a separate sort of series from our, obviously it would be part of my own, deep listening process.
Would be great. And I think
process, but I'd like to present it that way on my channel as so.
And there's a lot of people who I think would be really interested in seeing that, because it's kind of rare to those kind of videos of Jodo Shinshu chanting and so on in English, by English speakers are pretty rare, I think. So yeah, that'd be a great series to do. Absolutely. Right. Let's do it. Make it happen.
One thing I'll tell you too, kind of on a related note, there's in the UK here, I can't remember exactly where they are. There's about 2.5 hour drive or something from where I am in England. It's called the Shin Buddhist Fellowship, I think it's called, of the UK, Shin Buddhist Fellowship.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they call their sort of meeting house their Chomon House.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that when I'm looking for somewhere to, in the same time zone as me. And I think they are affiliated with the Hangwanji.
Yeah, they are.
National organization of Hangwanji.
Yeah.
So, and I'm looking for something like that I can,
yeah,
become part of. So I probably in the near future I will contact, because it sounds like they have sort of a Buddhist service on Wednesday nights, and then a Buddhist study on Thursday nights. So I'm going to start to try to contact them today and get
wonderful
involved with that. But do you know anything about
I don't know anything about that, them currently. I do know that I believe they were founded quite a while ago by Reverend Jack Austin, who was actually
Pure Land. It's called something like the Pure Land Buddhist Association or Society.
Yeah. And he was, I think, mentored by the late Zuikin Inagaki sensei, who was an excellent teacher of Jodo Shinshu, and was quite active. He was actually one of the first to translate. In fact, he was the first to translate Kyogyo Shinsho, partially at least, into English, and he was quite active in promoting Shinshu overseas. But I don't know anything about the UK, the current organization. So
familiar the things you're saying. I can't remember the current sensei here. I'm bringing it up now. Yeah, here we go. The Shin Buddhist Fellowship UK. It's Chomon House, or is the name of the Reverend Daichi Gary Robinson. Do you know that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but but it sounds wonderful. I mean, if you can find a community of people who are, equally
online, but I haven't actually made contact. So I'm gonna start to try to get a little more, get involved in that way through the
wonderful.
Yeah, in liturgical aspects of the liturgical aspects of deep listening, and start to bring that back in.
Yeah, I mean, I have always found it to be a great way to, personally to engage with the teaching and really, listen. Of course, you also it's good when you can have someone who can explain the meaning, of the text and so on in English too. So we can do that as well. In fact, what would be really fun to do would be Shoshinge, which is the main, event. and each verse, chant each verse, and then discuss each verse. Yeah. And that would be a long series. I mean, there's a lot of verses. Yeah.
Definitely. That'd be great. That's exactly the sorts of things I'd like to do with you. Definitely. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's
make it happen. Yeah, but as I say, with this Shin Buddhist Association UK, or Fellowship UK, with just that they call their, that was one of the things that they call it Chomon House. They call their place of
great name
dojo or their Chomon House. They kind of get it. Came to they kind of get the purpose of
yes.
Anyway,
Keep listening.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure.
This has been fantastic. One of my favorite topics, actually, is anytime any excuse to discuss Buddhist cosmology on any level in any way, I'm all in, all in there.
Great. Well, there will be many more opportunities, I think. So.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks so much. And
all right. Take care.
Great evening.
You
Namo
too.
Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Bye now.
Take care.